I have a twin sister, Allison, and for as long as I can remember, our family dynamic has revolved around her. Allison is 12 minutes older than me, and it seems those 12 minutes are everything to my parents. She has always been their golden child, while I've been the quiet shadow, the other twin. When my parents planned for a child, they meant one child, and Allison was the one they had wanted. Learning that from my drunk uncle at a Thanksgiving dinner during high school was like a slap in the face. Since that moment, I stopped hoping for validation from my parents. They had already made their choice, and Allison was it. Growing up, I tried so hard to make my parents proud, striving to outshine Allison in any way I could, especially in academics and extracurriculars. But I quickly realized that my success only made them resent me more. It wasn't just the competitive sibling rivalry you'd expect between twins. I was constantly made to feel like I was doing something wrong simply for existing. Allison knew how to play the game. She'd pretend to be hurt or upset by my achievements, playing the victim while people consoled her and criticized me. My parents, relatives, even friends, everyone seemed to rally around her while I was left in the cold. For a long time, I pushed myself harder to win them over, but eventually, I learned to find satisfaction in my own accomplishments, even if no one else celebrated them with me. 2 years ago, we celebrated our 21st birthday. By then, we had both graduated college, though our paths were quite different. Allison went to an average school, barely scraping by, while I had graduated from a prestigious business school with honors on a scholarship. I thought maybe this achievement would finally catch my parents' attention. But as usual, all they cared about was Allison and her struggles to find a job. While I was already interning at a well-known firm, she was struggling with rejections, and my parents were far more concerned with her failures than with my success. I was disappointed, but stayed silent. After all, I was still living under their roof and didn't have enough savings to move out on my own yet. Our 21st birthday was the breaking point. I had hoped that they might do something to celebrate, maybe just a small dinner. The day before, I found a note waiting for me in the kitchen. It said they had taken Allison and her friends to the beach and would be back in a few days. My parents left their other daughter behind on her 21st birthday with nothing but a happy birthday note and a $50 gift card. The betrayal was crushing. It felt as though every unfair moment, every hurtful comment, had culminated into this single act of blatant disregard. That was the last straw. I packed my things and left that day. Thankfully, I had friends who were more than willing to help me out, letting me stay with them until I found a place of my own. My job was paying well enough that I could manage my expenses, and I knew it wouldn't be long until I could afford my own place. I didn't tell my parents I was leaving. I just went. They didn't even notice until they called me the next day, not to wish me a happy birthday, but to ask if I could call a plumber to fix a leak in the house. When I told them I'd moved out, they barely reacted. There was no apology, no concern, just a simple okay. It hurt, but it also confirmed that I had made the right decision. Over the past 2 years, I've managed to build a life for myself. I got promoted at work, saved up, and now live in a cozy apartment in a nice neighborhood. It's no mansion, but it's mine, and I'm proud of what I've achieved. I hadn't heard from my parents or Allison since I left. Occasionally, I'd hear bits about Allison's life from mutual friends. Apparently, she married a wealthy businessman in California, 10 years older than her, and is now living a cushy life as a stay-at-home stepmom to his 2 kids. I wasn't surprised. Allison had always wanted a life of luxury, even if it meant hitching her wagon to someone else's star. But 2 days ago, my phone rang. It was my uncle urging me to come to the hospital. My parents had been in a serious car accident, hit by a truck, and were badly injured. They had been in the hospital for a few days already. My uncle explained that they had initially contacted Allison, but she refused to come back or offer any financial help, citing her new family as her priority. She didn't want to ask her husband for money to help them out and didn't want to leave her kids, who weren't actually her own, behind. Hearing that my parents, who had invested everything into Allison, were now being cast aside by her was strange. Still, I couldn't ignore my conscience, so I rushed to the hospital. When I arrived, my parents were shocked to see me, but it wasn't out of relief or joy, it was desperation. They needed help with their medical bills as they had no health insurance. My dad never believed in it, thinking that taking good care of oneself was insurance enough. I was their last resort since Allison had already rejected them. They even promised to repay me, though I had no idea how long that would take, given their circumstances. The thought of helping them felt wrong. They were, in essence, strangers to me. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, and they had never shown me a shred of love or support throughout my life. I told them I needed time to think about it, and left, knowing deep down that I didn't owe them anything. I realized I was still struggling with old habits. Years of trying to win my parents' approval had made me question whether I should step in, just to prove I wasn't as heartless as Allison. After talking to some friends and reflecting on it, I decided that I would not be paying their bills. It was a difficult decision, and I knew they would be furious, but I also knew they had other family members who could step up. When I finally answered their calls to tell them my decision, my mother's fury was immediate. She yelled at me, calling me ungrateful, while my dad told me I was no longer their daughter. But those words didn't sting the way they once would have. I hadn't felt like their daughter in years, and this conversation only confirmed that our connection was irreparably severed. Afterward, my uncle called, berating me for abandoning my parents in their time of need. He tried to guilt me, saying that my parents had planned to use my wedding fund to cover the bills. This fund, as I found out, was already drained from Allison's lavish wedding and their subsequent trip to Europe, which explained why they had no savings. Hearing that only strengthened my resolve. They had always prioritized Allison's happiness over mine, and now, in their time of need, they had no right to ask for my support. A couple of weeks passed, and life went back to normal until Allison showed up at my apartment. I was surprised she even knew where I lived. She waltzed in, looking the part of a trophy wife, with designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and a refined air she had picked up from her life in California. Despite her polished exterior, she was still the same person underneath, with an inflated sense of entitlement and selfishness that had defined her all her life. We made small talk for a while, or rather, she talked about herself for 15 minutes straight. She bragged about her lifestyle, how wonderful her life was as a stay-at-home stepmom, and even went as far as advising me to settle down like her. Eventually, she got to the point she had come back because our parents had been begging her to visit. She went on a tirade about how needy they were, how they expected her to be there for them, and how it was disrespectful to her new family. Then she dropped her real reason for visiting me. She wanted me to take over and care for our parents so she could go back to California without feeling guilty. She had promised them a month but was already planning to leave after just a few days because she was bored and tired of hearing about their accident. I could barely believe what I was hearing. Allison, the golden child, was now begging me to take on the role she had abandoned. She had no idea about my recent fallout with our parents, or that they had disowned me again after I refused to pay their bills. I could feel the old resentment bubbling up as she spoke, the years of neglect and hurt resurfacing with every word. But instead of lashing out, I kept my cool. I told her I'd think about it just to get her out of my apartment. She left, oblivious to the fact that I had no intention of stepping into her shoes. As I watched her walk out, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The years of hurt, the endless competition, and the constant need for validation from people who would never give it to me, It was all behind me. I knew now that I didn't need my parents' approval or Allison's acceptance to live a fulfilling life. This experience confirmed something I'd always known deep down. My family may have been the people I grew up with, but they weren't the people who had supported me, loved me, or even tried to understand me. And that was okay. I finally felt free from the weight of their expectations and disappointments. I could live my life without the ghosts of my past holding me back. My family may not have valued me, but I had learned to value myself. Now I'm moving forward without them, without the toxicity and manipulation that had colored so much of my life. My heart is lighter, and for the first time, I can truly focus on building a life that reflects my own values, free from the shadows of Allison and my parents. I am finally my own person, and that is enough.